The Innova has never really had a straight-up rival. If you look back, what competes with an Innova? An XL6, Ertiga, Carens? Not really. The Carnival, okay, maybe, but still it's not a straight-up rival. Neither are the 7-seater SUVs like the XUV700 and the Safari and even the Hector. So the Innova only competes with itself, and that's why when you have a new Innova, it competes with the old Innova. That's what we have here, the new Innova HyCross and the old Innova Crysta. Well, it's not exactly old because the Crysta continues to be sold. Obviously with a little bit more chrome around the nose, only the 2.4 diesel engine and only the manual gearbox. And what we have here is also interesting because this is the non-hybrid Innova HyCross. Our first look at the non-hybrid. How do the two compare? What are the upgrades of the HyCross over the Crysta? And should you buy the HyCross over the Crysta? That's what we'll find out in this video. But before we go ahead, don't forget to hit that like button, share this video with like-minded enthusiasts, and of course, if you enjoy this video, stay subscribed to the Evo India channel and hit that bell icon to stay notified for all our video drops. Before we get going, I must talk to you about the styling of the HyCross. Now, this is the GX variant, and if you're opting for the non-hybrid HyCross, this is the top of the line variant. You don't get a variant above this. So as you can see, there is no chrome on the face, and when you compare this to the top of the line variant, it does look a little bit under spec. You don't even get LED lights, and this is something that we are getting really used to on all kinds of vehicles. But what I really don't like are the size of these wheels. These are 16-inch wheels, and considering the size of the HyCross, they look terribly disproportionate. It needs at least 17s, if not 18-inch wheels. Now, in terms of the profile, the wheelbase is massive, and you can really see it in the profile. What is also massive are these rear doors. They are huge, and that helps in ease of ingress, egress into the third row. There is also significantly more space, and we will talk about that. At the rear, you still don't get a powered tailgate, but because everything is so light, it's very easy to use. And that brings me to the fact that it doesn't feel like an Innova. That Innova, it felt rock solid with the door shut, with the strength of the bodywork. This feels very different, very un-Innova-like. But in terms of the styling, having moved more towards an SUV, it moves away from that MPV, MUV boxiness. And I think the styling, it really does work. Notice how low this engine sits, and that tells you the difference between a ladder frame and a monocoque. In a ladder frame, you have the frame, then the body is over it. In between that, you have the engine. Whereas here in the monocoque, the engine can be situated nice and low. In fact, the engine bay looks half empty out here. But having the engine so low, it obviously aids with the dynamics. Low center of gravity, so better in terms of handling. This is the petrol engine, 4-cylinder petrol engine, not the hybrid, no diesel in the HyCross. It makes 171 bhp and is mated to the CVT transmission. The CVT transmission has 10 adjustable steps.
I hope you're subscribed to the Evo India YouTube channel, because next up, we're putting the Toyota Innova HyCross up against the Toyota Fortuner. Which of these 7-seaters should you put your money on? Stay tuned to find out.
Immediate first impression when you sit in the HyCross is that you now just walk into it. You don't have to clamber into the HyCross. Ingress, egress is excellent. Then the seats, they feel a little wider, a little plusher, excellent seats. Now this, the GX variant, does not get leatherette seats, and I far prefer these fabric seats. They are far better for our Indian conditions. In terms of the equipment on the GX variant, you get these hard, scratchy plastics, no soft touch plastics anywhere. You have a smaller infotainment screen, no digital cluster. You have normal analog dials, but these dials are styled in such an old school manner that I would rather here have a digital cluster, a very small MID. You get manual AC controls. I don't remember the last time I drove a car with manual AC controls. You get an automatic gearbox, you get USB-A for connecting to CarPlay, no wireless CarPlay, cable CarPlay, and you get USB-C for charging. in terms of the driving position, it is actually very good. You sit a little lower down in the Crysta, and that is good for confidence on the road. You don't have that high view of the road ahead, but that's because I've moved my seat nice and low, which you can do, which I prefer in terms of driving. The steering wheel feels a little smaller, and the best part is the steering wheel, it now adjusts for reach as well as rake. Notice that the Crysta only goes up and down, but here it also comes at you. So like I said, driving position is excellent. The ride comfort is also excellent, but we will come to that in a bit. You get this huge central storage box. Only thing, the quality of this lid, not good. The quality of this cup holder in front of the aircon vent, not good. The quality, they really have cheapened this out. The GX variant also does not get a sunroof. You only get the sunroof with the hybrid variants. And speaking about the powertrain, we have to talk about performance. This petrol engine, 4-cylinder, 2-liter, non-hybrid, so no hybrid assist. It makes 173 bhp and 209 Newton meters of torque. The torque is the big difference between the petrol Innova HyCross and the diesel Innova Crysta. The Crysta, even with the 2.4, it has 343 Newton meters of torque. Here, 209 Newton meters of torque. Big difference in terms of the effortlessness. You load up the Crysta and will still continue to chug along. This, the HyCross, it will start to struggle, particularly since it's mated to the CVT transmission. I'll let you hear the CVT transmission, so we'll switch to the GoPro audio out here. So it sounds pretty strained and hectic when you give it the beans. This struggles to really get going. The Innova with the 2.8 liter diesel engine is actually faster than the HyCross. Listen to it again. So honestly, it's not like the HyCross is slow. It's just that with the CVT transmission and that rubber band effect and all the noise that you have, it just sounds a bit more labored. And that's why when people drive this for the first time, they say that isme taakat nahi hai, which means it doesn't have the strength, it doesn't have the grunt of that diesel engine. It doesn't have that character of the Innova that we are so used to. The CVT transmission, you can also stick it into manual mode, and it has 10 steps. 10 steps. So you can go up the box like this, and you can go down the box like this. No paddle shifters for the steering wheel, but if you're going down a hilly road, you want some engine braking, you can use the manual mode on the CVT. And it is the hybrid that has that astonishing fuel efficiency figure. The non-hybrid ARI claimed figure is around 16.8, so it's not the most efficient. And in fact, hustling it around, we're getting around 8 kmpl, so it's not very efficient. The Crysta will have far lower running costs, but to drive the HyCross is just unbelievably easy. Over these speed breakers, it goes so easily, making 3-pointed turns. The steering is just so light. The turning circle now has become tighter. It is so maneuverable. It is astonishing how easy this big machine is to drive. And this is huge, make no mistake about it. It handles decently, it's safe, secure, and composed. On the highways, you can maintain a triple-digit speed and it will stay planted and stable. There's no pitch, there's no wallow. It is nice and stable, very comfortable. The ride comfort is superb. Like all this little undulating road, it just soaks it all in like incredibly well. And then there's the space inside. This is the 8-seater version. You also get the 7-seater with the captain seats in the middle. The width has increased, so it is wider. 3 people can sit abreast. The middle row, it slides, and when you slide it all the way back, the legroom is ridiculous. It is absurdly good in terms of the legroom. You set it in the midway position, and there is decent amount of space in the 3rd row. Ingress, egress into the 3rd row, that is also easy. There is good headroom. You have your blower controls. It is just tremendous. When you compare it with the Crysta, which is still the benchmark in that category, or at least was the benchmark till the HyCross came, this just takes those benchmarks and throws it out the window. The utilization of space inside the HyCross is phenomenal. Hats off to Toyota on that front. It's just ridiculous how easy the HyCross is to drive. And that is my biggest takeaway. Now, the Innova was never targeted at Enthu Cutlets, but Enthu Cutlets bought it because this was a practical car that you could drive every day and still it was good to drive. The HyCross, it moves it up. It moves the game on. It is great to be driven around in, and also it is great to drive considering the standards of the class. Of course, you push it a little hard through corners and it will start to understeer. It's got these piddly 16-inch wheels and tires, which, I don't know, that is cost cutting taken to some extreme levels. And in terms of styling, that's the only real drawback that I can find. I like the fact that it looks more SUV-ish and less like an MPV or an MUV. And even in this variant, this GX variant, I have been critical about it, all these scratchy, hard plastics. But even then, this is great. And eventually, when the HyCross starts moving into the taxi market, which will take time because the Crysta is still there, so everybody's going to still stick with their Crystas. But eventually, when everything moves to the taxi market, I'll be really happy to be chauffeured around in this. This will be great for those Pune-Mumbai airport runs. Have I told you about the refinement? The silence is brilliant. It's a world away from the Crysta. The Crysta, you can always hear the diesel engine rumbling. Even at idle, even at cruising speeds, you can always hear the diesel engine. Here, it's only when you're giving it a little gas do you hear the engine. Otherwise, when you're cruising, it is dead silent. The refinement is 10 times better than the Crysta. And we haven't really criticized the Crysta for refinement, but 10 times better, the HyCross. But to drive, it feels nothing like the Crysta. Absolutely nothing at all. The strength of the monocoque chassis means that you get better body control, better handling. You can push it into corners a little bit more. A lot of enthusiasts will say, oh, I prefer the rear wheel drive. But for a car like this, front wheel drive works very well. It handles well, grips well. The only real downside is that when you gas it, this noise. It's just too noisy. I don't think there's anybody who does not know what an Innova feels like. Everybody's been in an Innova, whether it's in the driver's seat or more likely in the passenger or the captain seats at the rear. So this is a thoroughly familiar car and I don't really need to tell you much about it. But just for the sake of this test, let's quickly recap through the Innova. The Innova you see here is no longer in production. You no longer get an automatic gearbox with the Crysta. You get only the 2.4 liter diesel engine, not the 2.8. Power is now 150 bhp and 343 Newton meters of torque. So that's down over the 2.8. The 2.8 made 171 bhp and 370 Newton meters of torque. So the power and torque are down, but it's still not sluggish. And when you compare it with the HyCross, the torque of the diesel engine is still significantly more than the petrol engine. So in terms of the effortlessness, the Crysta, the powertrain, is still a bit more effortless than the HyCross. Now, of course, the Crysta is heavier. The Crysta is based on a ladder frame chassis. The Crysta is rear wheel drive. And the Crysta, forgive me for saying this, is a bit more truck-like to drive compared to the HyCross. The HyCross is just so easy, whereas the Crysta, now in comparison, feels a bit cumbersome. When you take 3-pointed turns, the steering is a bit more heavy. It still takes a little bit more effort. It's not fingertip light or easy to drive, but you have that effortlessness of diesel. So if you load up the car completely with a full complement of say 8 passengers plus their luggage, which obviously will not fit in the boot, so you'll put a carrier on top, you'll put the luggage on top, the HyCross is not going to be able to take that kind of abuse. Whereas the Crysta, it will continue to take solid abuse, and that will be its forte. The Crysta obviously is going to be sold primarily amongst fleet operators, taxi operators, and they will continue to use it in extremely hard, tough conditions, using it non-stop without a break. Will the HyCross survive that kind of beating, that kind of abuse, that kind of non-stop usage over all kinds of roads that you find in India? We can only wait and watch. You can't say. I honestly don't think it'll be as solid as this ladder frame Crysta, but who knows? Toyota, their quality has always been unimpeachable. Maybe the HyCross will also surprise us. We were surprised by how the Innova lasted and lasted. So maybe the HyCross also will have a few surprises up its sleeve. But for now, if you want to use the Innova as a fleet vehicle, probably still makes sense to stick with the Crysta. You also get the benefit of running costs. The diesel will give you good fuel efficiency and of course lower running costs than the petrol on the HyCross. And the non-hybrid is not as efficient as the hybrid. It's the hybrid that gives those stunning fuel efficiency figures. The non-hybrid is okay. Yesterday evening we saw around 13 kmpl in the city, which I think was optimistic. Today we are seeing around 8 kmpl with a little bit of enthusiastic driving, so that's the kind of efficiency you're going to get. In terms of handling, the Crysta was always something that surprised us with its handling, but now when you compare it with the HyCross, it's nowhere close. The monocoque handling is just so much better. Then there's also the ride comfort. The HyCross is just so comfortable, so much more comfortable than the Crysta. Nobody will say that the Crysta is uncomfortable. Maybe if you compare it with the Carnival is a little bit more plush. But otherwise, the Crysta has always been so comfortable, so great for long highway drives. The HyCross, it takes everything that the Crysta does and just moves it up a notch. The HyCross can be called properly plush. And then there's the space efficiency, the packaging. You have that full flat floor in the HyCross. So much more space. It's wider. It's got more space between the seats, more headroom. The seats are plusher. Everything in terms of comfort, the HyCross, it just beats the Crysta by miles. So in the final analysis, the Crysta is great if you're going to be using it as a fleet vehicle. Even today, after so many years, the Crysta is still excellent. But if you're going to be using it for private use, the HyCross has to be it. Long ago, when Toyota first brought in the Innova, it came in at the expense of the Qualis. Remember back then, the Qualis was still selling in solid numbers. It was the best seller in its segment by a fair margin. Yet Toyota, they axed the Qualis, brought in the Innova. They said they wanted nothing to do with the past, with the old car, and brought in something completely new. We had never seen anything like that. Maruti, they used to sell everything for years and years and years. The 800 sold for 25 years. While the 800 was selling, we had the Zen, we had the Alto, and all of them were replacements for each other, yet all continued. We threw nothing away. Toyota showed us that that was not the way. This was the way forward. Out with the old, in with the new. Except now, we have the old Innova and the new Innova selling side by side. We are clearly not fans of this strategy. Old cars should be junked, end of story. But that said, the Crysta and the HyCross are two completely different vehicles. In fact, the HyCross has zero Innova feels. It doesn't feel like an Innova, doesn't drive like an Innova, doesn't handle like an Innova, nothing. Zero Innova feels. In fact, the HyCross could have been called just the HyCross without the Innova suffix and would still do really well because as a product, it is fantastic. That said, the Crysta, it will still appeal to that audience that wants something indestructible, that can be abused non-stop and continue without a single squeak or rattle. Can the HyCross do that? Only time will tell. As of now, I don't think so, but only time will tell. This is still conjecture. But otherwise, in every measurable parameter, the HyCross is superior to the Crysta.